From pop culture to politics, this is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day if you believe that the House floor is the equivalent of hell. Why do I say that? Because the breaking news from Politico, it says House floor freezes over. And Nicole Malliotakis, a member of Congress, said today, who needs Democrats when you have your own party derailing the Trump agenda? Last July 4th recess, House Republicans were triumphantly celebrating their massive victory of clearing the party's tax and spending bill, that great big beautiful bill. Remember that? Fast forward 1 year, and Speaker Mike Johnson can't even get enough votes to open his chamber's floor for debate. No, they're frozen. But that doesn't mean that President Trump is frozen, because he's been tremendously active and hugely successful, not as a political leader necessarily, but as a businessman. The New York Times is reporting that President Trump reaped a stunning windfall in his first year back in the White House, including about $1.4 billion from his family's cryptocurrency business. That's according to a brand new filing. All told, the president pulled in at least $2.2 billion. That's a figure that includes other parts of his vast holdings, such as his real estate assets. That compares to a minimum of $622 million that his enterprises pulled in for all of 2024 before he returned to the presidency. But it was Mr. Trump's crypto business that proved to be a top revenue stream. In other words, there's no question at all now that he is benefiting personally, he and his family, for his service as president. Once an outspoken skeptic of crypto, reports the New York Times, Mr. Trump embraced the industry on the campaign trail during the campaign of 2024 and started a series of ventures that have reaped enormous sums. And speaking of enormous sums, his enormous sons, in terms of their success, they helped create World Liberty. That's Eric and Don Jr., not so much Barron, who's still too young. But Eric and Don Jr. launched World Liberty, which is a crypto firm that sells a digital currency called SWLFI. Now, what does that stand for? I don't think it spells out Hunter Biden, but that is a recollection that really needs to be made, because Hunter Biden-style sleaze is just as slimy, well, as the reflecting pool in the near the Lincoln Memorial, and it's just as slimy as when the Trump boys do it, as when Hunter Biden and his uncle did it during the Biden administration. Meanwhile, the tourists from Chattanooga are shown in an AP story checking into beach resorts in Cancun. Canadian auto parts feed factories in the American Midwest, and vice versa. Happy hour revelers raise glasses of Mexican tequila and mezcal at bars in Seattle. It adds up. The United States now trades $1.9 trillion a year, $5 billion a day worth of goods and services with our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. They have replaced China to become America's top two trading partners. So the stakes are huge when it comes to fiddling with the rules that govern trade between the three big countries of North America: United States, Canada, Mexico. And after a year of President Donald Trump's chaotic tariff policies, many U.S., Canadian, and Mexican businesses would welcome the return of stability across North America. Speaking of the return of stability, we now have a decision from the Supreme Court. Some are saying it's a 6-3 decision, which is what the apparent total looks like at the Supreme Court. Others say it was a 5-4 decision, but the decision in substance is unarguable. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed the constitutional commitment, and they did this by a majority vote, of birthright citizenship. We're going to be talking about that with John Yoo, who is one of the very most prominent conservative political scholars in the country, teaches at University of California at Berkeley and at University of Texas Law School in Austin. And Professor Yoo is going to be joining us to talk not only about what the birthright citizenship means to the country, whether it was rightly decided or not, and then also what is going on with war resolutions that are intended by Democrats to put an end to the American struggle with Iran. Is that going to work constitutionally? Is that going to work politically? We'll be talking about that with Professor John Yoo. And meanwhile, there is more shocking and I believe horrifying political news out of Colorado this time. The Colorado Attorney General, whose name is Phil Weiser, defeated Senator Michael Bennet, who is a self-proclaimed moderate Democrat, in the state's Democratic gubernatorial primary. Senator Bennet, who had been there a long time and established his moderate reputation, decided to run for governor. He had run for president before unsuccessfully, but it turns out that he lost the primary, and he lost the primary to the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, who will likely replace the term-limited governor, Jared Polis. Weiser had accused his opponent of being too soft on Trump, but also having too important a position in the Senate to leave that office. Bennet has served in the Senate since 2009. The Republican gubernatorial primary, meanwhile, remained too close to call. That's on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, Weiser has won. But on the Republican side, State Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer is narrowly leading a ministry leader, Victor Marks, and State Representative Scott Bottoms. No Republican candidate has won a statewide office in Colorado since 2016. And Polis beat his GOP opponent by almost 20 points for his second term in 2022. Meanwhile, Democratic Socialist, Milot Quiros, is defeating longtime Colorado Representative Diana DeJet in a Democratic primary. This is marking the third setback for the party's mainstream. Quiros, who is just 29 years old, is the third socialist, progressive, so-called challenger to unseat an incumbent House Democrat in just over a week after those two victories against House incumbents in New York State. Her victory underscores the growing influence of the party's left wing ahead of the midterm elections and the 2028 presidential race. The Washington Post takeaway: voters are angry, and Democratic voters seek a fighter above all. In a campaign built on who would best fight President Donald Trump, Bennett's only advantage evaporated as Weiser argued the lawsuits he filed against the administration make him a better antagonist than an 18-year creature of Congress. We'll be right back with Professor John Yoo coming up. And on the Michael Medved Show, it is always a distinct honor and a pleasure to welcome back to the show Professor John Yoo. He is the Heller Professor of Law at the University of California at Berkeley, where he has been teaching for years. He is also the Distinguished Visiting Scholar at the University of Texas at Austin, and he is a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And John Yoo, good morning to you. He has played a role in the Justice Department during the George W. Bush administration. And I know you've been outspoken on the decisions handed down yesterday, particularly the decision verifying and backing up the idea, the guarantee of birthright citizenship. Generally, do you believe that the majority of the court, it's either a 5-4 vote or a 6-3 vote?
I think so. And the reason why has been the rule, I think, in our country since the founding. It was the rule of the British common law, which is the law that governed both England and the colonies. And then when we split 250 years ago, really tomorrow, on July 2nd. July 4th is just when the Declaration issued, but we actually voted to become independent tomorrow. And we kept the rule. And it was primarily administered by states. The federal government passed no immigration laws until the late 19th century. The great break, and I think both the majority and dissent recognize this, was Dred Scott, which denied citizenship to the free blacks and the slaves, even though they'd been born in the United States. And so the 14th Amendment, I think, tried to restore that rule, overruled Dred Scott, and the Supreme Court interpreted it that way in a case called Wong Kim Ark at the end of the 19th century. And that rule governed without really any dissent until President Trump came to office and tried to end birthright citizenship. And the Supreme Court yesterday decided, it depends how you count it, 6-3, I would say, to keep the rule, reject President Trump's executive order, and maintain the stability of the way we've decided who are citizens in our country from the very beginning of the founding to today.
What's interesting is there's an editorial today in the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal has been generally supportive of birthright citizenship and basically believes that the decision was appropriate. That was, I think the name of the case is Trump versus Barbara. But in any event, they put at the end of their editorial, if birth tourism is as big a problem as Mr. Trump says it is, he can make a sustained case for a constitutional amendment. And then yesterday, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, was also talking about a constitutional amendment to obliterate birthright citizenship once and for all. Is this an idea that's going to work?
No, I think, first of all, I think you're right. You need a constitutional amendment. And I think what we actually had was a constitutional amendment to restore birthright citizenship after the worst war in American history, after the Civil War. So the idea that the country would, right, 2/3 of the Congress, 3/4 of the states would vote, I think, to overturn one of the great achievements of the 14th Amendment, I don't think that's likely. I actually think there is something Congress can do and the president can do, which is not to try to overturn birthright citizenship. If birther tourism is really a problem, then try to stop people from coming into the country in the first place who try to have babies and then leave. Yeah, they're doing that. Or try to stop them after they have the baby and punish them for breaking our laws. I mean, Congress could pass a law making it a crime to do this. But, you know, I looked at the numbers, Michael. I wrote a piece about this when President Trump issued his executive order. And look, the major problem about illegal immigration is not birther tourism, which I think at best any given year might be 100,000 to 200,000 babies born a year. No one's really quite sure. When you had 3 million people coming across the border illegally every year under the Biden administration, that's the real problem with immigration, not these babies. That's a drop in the bucket compared to. So once you've, as President Trump has, closed the southern border, this birthright tourism issue is not really a big problem at all, as from a policy perspective.
One of the questions always becomes if the overturning of birthright citizenship were actually enacted, if that had gone forward, what happens to the people? And there are many millions of them. I believe it's well over 10 million of the people who live here, who were born here in this country, but who had parents who came here illegally. What do you do with them?
Michael, that's a great point. That shows, I think, the inherent unworkability of the opposite rule, which would base citizenship on bloodline. Well, how far back do you have to go to prove that your parents are here illegally? Because under the theory that you're not a citizen, if you're born here, that there's some other criteria which the government is never very clear on. I think a lot of people, not just at 10 million. I mean, why doesn't it stop? Why does it stop at one generation? Why doesn't it keep going back and back and back until only people who came here legally from the very beginning are here, and their children, I guess, are citizens? That's one question. Another point, people have, I think, rushed too quickly through the opinions, and they actually miss a key point of agreement between the dissent, which was written by my old boss, Justice Thomas, and the majority opinion by Chief Justice Roberts. They all really focus on the idea of people coming here and then leaving with no intention to stay, but just to get their children citizenship. Even Justice Thomas acknowledges that if people come, maybe they come illegally, maybe they outstay their visas, they have a kid, and then they intend to stay here. They want to be Americans. They want to be residents. Even Justice Thomas admits they might get birthright citizenship. So it might actually be that the court is a lot closer and has more of a consensus than the media thinks.
Well, that's right. Justice Thomas writes about establishing a domicile here in the United States, which really means if you came here with the intention of staying. Am I reading your old boss right? We will
exactly right.
Well, thank you. We will get to that and more. And war powers resolutions. Is that a way that Congress can overrule the president in putting an end to the continuing war, for instance, in Iran? We'll get to that with Professor John Yoo coming up on the Michael Medved Show. John Yoo is not only a distinguished conservative legal scholar teaching at the University of Texas and for many years at the University of California at Berkeley. He is also a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and he is the author of a book called The Powers of War and Peace. And Professor Yoo, right now there's some debate as to whether or not Congress, which has voted in a war powers resolution, can use that resolution to force the president to end the American military involvement against Iran. Where do you believe that the Constitution and precedent in America comes down on this one about war powers resolutions that were adopted in the 70s?
I don't think that the kind of resolutions that the Congress is passing have any constitutional or legal weight on the president and preventing him from continuing to conduct hostilities against Iran. It might have a political weight because it shows perhaps that a majority of Congress are now against the war or want it ended quickly. But I think as a constitutional matter, Congress, if it really wants to end the war in Iran, really opposes President Trump's decision to launch hostilities, it has to cut off funds. That's really been the traditional way Congress has ended wars. That's the way maybe the most controversial war in our history, the Vietnam War, ended. When Congress didn't pass a law just saying, we want the war over, what they did is they cut funds off for any hostilities in Southeast Asia. That's how another controversial war, the Mexican-American War of 1848, ended because Congress didn't want to take as much of Mexico as President Polk wanted to. So you've always seen Congress back up its political views with the power of the purse. Here, Congress has that opportunity. Congress is being asked by the Trump administration for billions of dollars to replenish the coffers so that it can continue to fight the war. If Congress wants to end the war, all they have to do is refuse to pass that bill.
So is there any real prospect, any support for the idea of Congress preemptively cutting off funds for continued hostilities in Iran? Wouldn't that be handing the mullahs a tremendous victory?
I agree, which is why I think sometimes Congress votes for these symbolic resolutions saying no more war. But when you really have to make the critical choice, are we going to continue funding the military in the Persian Gulf? Congress, I expect, will fund it. They don't want to be responsible for the United States losing a war. In fact, I think even passing these resolutions, even these people who are voting no to the funding, are helping Iran in its effort to negotiate this peace deal with President Trump. The more that President Trump looks like he's dealing with a large dissenting minority here or a Democratic Party that might cut off and end the funding during these peace negotiations, the more it hurts the bargaining position of the United States. So I think there's a lot of members of Congress who like to perform and act where they're against the war in Iran. But when it really comes down to it, when they have to make the hard choices, I expect a majority will still continue to fund the war.
There are many people out there who think that the memorandum of understanding that we have, that the Trump administration is still negotiating as the basis for ending the war, that memorandum of understanding actually hands a victory to the Iranians. The Iranians certainly seem to think so. Your response to that assumption?
I think if it's a way of attacking the war itself, I think that's a mistake. I think critics of the memorandum, and I don't favor the exact terms, miss the real change in the capabilities of Iran before the war started and now. If you look at what our generals are saying under oath to Congress, we have destroyed the ability of Iran to project power beyond its borders and to threaten its neighbors. Now, even if the memorandum of understanding is executed the way it's written, it will take years and years for Iran to rebuild those capabilities and threaten the neighbors the way it could have the day before the war. On the other hand, I don't like the terms of the memorandum of understanding. I actually think the better approach to use towards Iran, if they continue interfering with shipping through the strait, if they continue trying to rebuild their ballistic missiles and nuclear programs and fund terrorists who are surrounding and attacking Israel and our troops, is to do to them what we did to Iraq after the Persian Gulf War and contain them and continue to use military force now and then to stop them from rebuilding these forbidden nuclear programs and ballistic missile armies. I think that that's better than actually coming to a peace deal that looks like what the MOU describes.
Okay, that one of the questions that is part of the negotiation now is the involvement of the Lebanese government and the Israeli government in joining together, in effect, to stop the influence of Hezbollah in dominating southern Lebanon. Now, all of that is very complicated, but is that a realistic goal for the administration to pursue?
I don't think that we should be allowing Iran to insert Lebanon, Hezbollah, anything involving the fighting around Israel into a peace deal that's between the United States and Iran. I think it's always been our position, right? We have these terrible relations with Iran. We're not going to allow that to hinge or even recognize that the activities of this bloodthirsty terrorist group, right, in southern Lebanon should have any effect on the essential deal we're trying to make, which is a stop in hostilities in exchange for an end to their nuclear program and free passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And I think personally, we should give our ally Israel a free hand in how it protects its security. I don't think that we have the right to bargain away Israel's right to protect its own self-interest in a peace deal between us and Iran.
And do you believe that the administration is going to go back to an increased military strike against Iran, or will be successful in implementing and restructuring this memorandum of understanding?
I think one lesson we should have learned from the past dealings with Iran, and that I think the Trump administration is learning now, is that the Iranians don't have any intention of keeping to the word of the agreement. They're just going to keep trying to press and press to see what they can get away with. I noticed, I saw a comment, I think by a former NATO commander, General Stavridis, where he said, "I've bought a lot of rugs in the Persian Gulf. I don't think I've ever paid a fair price for any of them." Because
that's Admiral Stavridis.
Yes, Admiral Stavridis. I think that's the way we have to treat their attitude towards bargaining, that they're constantly trying to reopen the deal to test how seriously we take it. So unfortunately, I think, and this is what we did with Iraq, is I think we might have to have a long-term presence patrolling Iran to make sure they live up to any deal we make. No matter what we sign on paper, I still think you need to have force behind it, the threat of force behind it, in order to force them to keep their word.
That's Professor John Yoo. Appreciate your keeping track of everything for us. And if you want to keep track of John Yoo's opinions and background and scholarship, there's material posted at our website at michaelmedved.com. John, happy 4th of July. May we all celebrate this incredibly great country with more incredibly great successes in foreign policy and economic policy and in the cause of liberty. John Yoo, what a pleasure speaking with you. All best for this great 250th anniversary coming up. We will be right back.
The Michael Medved Show.
Listen.
Nationwide.
Listen.
And around the world at michaelmedved.com.
And listen.
And on the Michael Medved Show, the entire world is beginning to wonder, with the big victories last night in Colorado in the Democratic primary, where another longtime incumbent member of the House, Diana DeJette, was voted out of office in the Democratic primary. That she is voted out by an opponent who is only 29 years old. And you have to be 25 years old to run for Congress, according to the Constitution. So this is people who want a young blood, and they actually also do want blood. They don't want blood necessarily of the Democratic, what's called the Democratic establishment. I think the better way to describe it is really the Democratic mainstream. They don't want that blood, but they want somebody who is going to be bloody, implacable, and uncompromising and radical in terms of opposing Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump, while he has solid support still from the MAGA movement and from most members of the Republican Party, is singularly unpopular among Democrats of a moderate streak and Democrats of a radical streak. The radical streak appears to be more in tone with the levels of anger and indignation and implacable opposition that are more popular among the Democratic left. In terms of the Democratic left, J.B. Pritzker is one of the few Democratic possibilities as a candidate for president. He's the governor of Illinois. And J.B. Pritzker was on CNN talking about one of the problems that he perceives with his fellow Democrats on the left. This is clip 20.
The truth is that these are folks, like I said, who are talking about, listen, it is going to be hard to deliver on some things when you're saying I'm going to offer free. I don't know, people want to ban rent, for example. And I'd love it if we could offer some people, free rent that don't have free rent now. But there is also the practical reality of we've got to pay the bills and make sure that we're balancing budgets and so on. I say all that, but you know what? When you're talking about and then doing the things like making electric bills lower or like lowering homeowners insurance or health insurance or auto insurance rates like we're doing in the state of Illinois, I think it really does matter, and the voters show up for you when you do.
Okay. He, I think, is going to have a very tough race as president of the United States, partially because he is so wealthy. He is a billionaire. He is on the Trump level of wealth right now, and that is something that is not popular among Democrats at the moment. They're looking for community organizers. Yes, that was the job description for Barack Obama before he started getting elected to the state Senate in Illinois. And another candidate from Illinois, and he would like to say, in the tradition of Obama and Lincoln, a good try, or maybe not such a good try. CNN's Caitlin Collins was speaking on the air about the breaking news about Trump making more than $1 billion in cryptocurrency, not for the country, not for the people he's serving, but for himself and his immediate family. That, according to Caitlin Collins on CNN, is stunning. This is clip 19.
The president made more than $1 billion his first year back in office, and that more than $1 billion came from his family's cryptocurrency businesses alone. It's a remarkable windfall for a sitting president, and this is just what he made from cryptocurrency, not what he made from real estate ventures, from the products that he sells, Trump shoes, Trump watches, Trump Bibles. What we're learning here is that president made, as we're looking at this, more than $526 million from selling cryptocurrency tokens alone that are tied to World Liberty Financial. That's that firm that is managed by his sons, Eric and Donald Trump Jr. in part. And it also shows in these financial disclosures that the president got an array of income from his properties, lavish gifts from CEOs and foreign leaders, and also royalty and licensing fees for what are known as celebration coins and the Trump watches, more than $200,000 alone from the Trump Bibles. The White House has denied that the president is conflicted by his financial interests. They say he doesn't control it, though when it comes to cryptocurrency, obviously he's a stakeholder here. He's also a top policymaker.
Okay, and as a top policymaker, there is this breaking news, which is very directly important. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Trump has been briefed on all-out war options in Iran. But for the time being, at least, he opts to stick with talks instead of all-out war. The president has told aides that he is fine if negotiations with Tehran blow past an August 18th deadline for a nuclear deal. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Donald Trump has weighed restarting a full-scale war with Iran, holding multiple talks with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Oh, I'm sure he'll give good advice. And Joint Chiefs Chairman, Dan Kane, about launching more strikes. For now, however, the president is sticking with diplomatic talks, according to U.S. officials. The talks centered on whether the U.S. should abandon negotiations and resume full-scale attacks on Iran, a move some officials described as finishing the job. Now, I don't know if they have reliable polling on this, but would that be popular if President Trump returned to all-out war? And what would it do to economic measures? things that he does care about, like the stock market or the gross domestic product, or basically how our economy is doing, which is doing well right now. But if we went back to all-out war with Iran, meanwhile, the President Trump's sweeping changes to student loans take effect today, bringing higher monthly payments for some borrowers and tighter borrowing limits for others. Experts say the overhaul will ripple across generations, affecting everyone from new professionals to parents helping pay for their child's education. Meanwhile, there is another prospective Democratic candidate for president who says straight out now that he thinks that Trump is suffering from dementia. And this particularly, given the embarrassing appearances on the campaign trail recently by former President Biden, who does not sound commanding or credible, particularly with the speeches that he is trying to deliver. The idea that Trump is the one suffering from dementia, who is saying that? We will get to that. We will also get to more, including J.D. Vance reacting to the birthright citizenship decision yesterday by the Supreme Court, and also disastrous comments by Stephen Miller on that decision. Meanwhile, NPR is focusing on win or go home. The United States is going to be confronting, not on the battlefield, but on the soccer pitch, I think they call it, against mighty Bosnia and Herzegovina in World Cup knockout game. This is taking place in Santa Clara, California. The U.S. men's national team has ambitions of a deep run at the FIFA World Cup, all hanging on something they haven't accomplished since 2021, beating a team from Europe. We will get to that and more, with good luck to every venture that's American, representing this greatest nation on God's green earth.